everyone. I am Nancy Naji. I am Nancy Naji. I am Nancy Naji. Welcome to our segment Hello Money. Today we'll be talking about the payday. You have to be street smart. We all know this year. No grief for anybody is our 2024 tagline. Hello everyone, thank God it's Friday. Welcome to the program. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Naji. Let's get started with what's in the news. President Bola Tinubu has approved the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira for Nigerian workers and committed to a review of the minimum wage law every 3 years. President Tinubu also pledged to support the private sector and states to pay the minimum wage.
By absolute powers. We have our constituents. The National Executive Council meeting, we are going to report back to them. And in most instances, they may likely approve what we have done. But this is not, we can't talk with absolute finality.
The president made a pronouncement of 70,000 naira that by next week that they should put finishing touches and do the transmission to the National Assembly. We from organized labor, we have been pushing that the issue of 5 years review is too much, that a lot of economic indices may have changed because we are in an era where things are moving very fast in terms of both macro and microeconomic policies. But with also the caveat that this is going to be done every 3 years, 3 years, the next review will be 3 years. And after that pronouncement, we from Labour, just has been said as well, we have received what the president has promised from both ends.
The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission has confirmed that Nigeria's crude oil production totaled 236.2 million barrels in the first half of 2024. According to the Commission, the breakdown of monthly production states 44.2 million barrels in January, 38.3 million barrels in February, 38.1 million barrels in March, 38.4 million barrels in April, 38.8 million barrels in May, and 38.3 million barrels in June. This marks an increase compared to the same period in 2023. The Central Bank of Nigeria has projected that the external reserves may experience a slight reduction this year. The reserves, previously reported at $33.09 billion in 2023, are expected to decrease marginally this year. This projection is based on anticipated ongoing payments for outstanding foreign exchange forward obligations, matured foreign exchange swaps, and debt servicing obligations. The Central Bank of Nigeria has resumed dollar sales to licensed bureau de change operators, and this decision follows a 2-month gap since the last sale in April. In a circular signed by the Acting Director of the Trade and Exchange Department of the Central Bank of Nigeria, A.A. Madi, the Apex Bank specified it will allocate $20,000 to each BDC. The CBN directed the BDCs to sell to end users at a maximum margin of 1,450 naira per dollar, translating to an end user rate of 1,475 naira 75 kobo per dollar. The federal government has inaugurated the National Clean Tech Innovation Entrepreneurship Ecosystem to nurture innovation and assist startups and small and medium enterprises across the country. Minister of Innovation, Science and Technology, Uche Naji, emphasized that the initiative aims to address the commercialization challenges that clean tech startups encounter despite their potential to boost economic growth and expand access to renewable energy. The National Population Commission has announced its readiness to conduct a population and housing census pending approval for President Bola Tinubu. MPC Federal Commissioner for Lagos State, Saidat Oladujoye, made this declaration on Thursday during an event marking this year's World Population Day, emphasizing that the current population of Nigeria remains uncertain since the last census was conducted nearly 2 decades ago. The Minister of Sports Development, Senator John Eno, has revealed that the federal government has approved more than 12 billion naira for the upcoming 2024 Paris Olympic Games. The Paris Olympic Games is scheduled to hold from July 26 to August 11 in France. In addition, the Paralympics is expected to hold August 28 to September 8. King Charles has hosted a reception for European leaders at the European Political Community meeting on Thursday. Among the leaders he met were Ukraine's President Zelensky, France's Emmanuel Macron, and Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. During the gathering, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer urged for enhanced cooperation within Europe to strengthen support for Ukraine and address critical continental issues, including illegal migration, climate change, and energy security. This stance marks a departure from the previous conservative government's approach, which had previously threatened to withdraw from an international human rights treaty, representing a fresh start to other European leaders. Let's move over to the markets now. On Thursday, the Nigerian exchange equity market capitalization approached 57 trillion naira, which is a significant increase of approximately 263 billion naira over the previous day on the local exchange, with a gain of 0.47%. The all-share index closed the day higher at 100,503.21 points. A number of mid to high cap stocks saw buying interest in the market, including Airtel Africa, that was up by 4.76%, Owando, and United Capital. The delisting of 3 listed companies on the Nigerian exchange was the reason for the discrepancy between the indicators that we saw on Thursday, as traders told us on Thursday. All stock trading was suspended when Niger Insurance PLC, Resort Savings and Loans, and RAC Unity Petroleum PLC were removed from the NGX platform. The overall value traded and total volume traded for Thursday dropped by 17.3% and 64.27% respectively, marking a slight decline in yesterday's market activity. Now, brokerages reported that 9,013 deals totaling about 392.80 million units valued at 8.33 million were completed. While GTCO was the most traded stock by volume, accounting for 10.13% of total trading volume, followed by Veritas, CAP, FCMB, UBA, and QTix PLC. For Airtel Africa, it emerged as the most traded stock in terms of value, accounting for 26.95% of all the trades on the exchange. Now, let's move over to the global markets. What you see now is for African markets, of course, South Africa as well as Ghana, we're seeing mixed trade there. But if we move over to the United States, U.S. stock futures were quiet on Thursday evening as Wall Street sought to stabilize after a drop in equities. Investors will also be watching the political scene where Donald Trump, of course, is stepping up his campaign as the RNC comes to a close, and President Joe Biden is under pressure from fellow Democrats to withdraw from the race. For European markets this morning, we saw lower open across our board as investors weighed the latest ECB interest rates decision. After cutting interest rates in June, the European Central Bank announced yesterday that they would remain unchanged for the time being. Now, if we move over to Asia, investors analyzed Japan's June inflation figures for clues on the Bank of Japan's potential moves at its monetary policy meeting on July 30 and 31. So let's see how that will go. The country's headline inflation rate remained unchanged from May at about 2.8%. That's in Japan. Now, if we move over to commodities, all prices are falling in early trade today, with Brent crude falling to about 84 US dollars, between 84 to 85, as you can see right there on the screen. So that number definitely oscillates. Prices oscillate actually because trade is an ongoing thing. So we're seeing that oil is being set up for a second weekly decline, perhaps at the end of today, as mixed economic signals weigh on investor sentiment and boosted the dollar. For gold, prices edged higher on Thursday as expectations of a September interest rate cut from the United States Fed grew. Spot gold was down about 0.21% to 2,400 US dollars range, as you can see right there on the screen per ounce. Silver is doing $29.32. Iron ore is at 108 US dollars. Do we have other agricultural commodities? There, palm oil. Palm oil is, that number you're seeing there is the Malaysian currency. Wheat is at 533 US dollars, cocoa at 8,087, sugar is trading at 1891. All right, that's it for the markets. Let's quickly take a break, and when we return from the break, we will be dissecting the minimum wage conversation from like about 1 million to 600 and something thousand to 250,000 to about now 70,000. It seems that the federal government and Labour has agreed, even though that Labour has told us that, oh, it will meet its members today. Perhaps there's even an ongoing meeting now as we speak, and the president will transmit the minimum wage bill to the National Assembly next week. We'll be looking at all sides of the matter in terms of, you know, perhaps also just opposing the new minimum wage of 70,000 naira as against the current economic realities. And is everyone in the country entitled to this minimum wage of 70,000 naira? I bet you don't know, but we'll be telling you more when we get into the conversation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the program. My guests are joining me right now. My first guest is Adedoyin Adebayo. He's the publisher of The Laborer's Guide. Welcome to the program, Mr. Adebayo.
Thank you, Nancy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Nabila Mohammed is next. She's a research analyst at Chapel Hill, Denham. Hello, Nabila, and welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Now, let me start with you, Mr. Adebayo. How did you take the decision yesterday? How did you take the results of the meeting yesterday after the closed-door meeting by organized labor as well as the president? How did you take the outcome?
Thank you, Nancy. For me, I think it's about time we have a national minimum wage, despite some breach in the procedures leading to the outcome. I will adopt the word of the president of the National Labour Congress by saying that that is where we are. So from now, we are going to see the effects of this new minimum wage on Nigerians and the welfare of workers, subject to the ratification of the National Assembly. It's about time we have it now, considering the fact that negotiations have dragged on and dragged on, but then, thank God we have one now.
Okay. Nabila, over to you with this question around, are you surprised as to where we ended yesterday? Now, let me give you the context. Of course, Labour had requested millions, perhaps 1 million naira at the time. Then I think it went down to 615,000. Then we also had, I think, 500K. Then there were 497,000. I can't even remember now. I'm just trying to remember the figures we were hearing. 497. That at the time 250,000. Then yesterday ended at 70K. Meanwhile, the government had moved, I think, 48,000, 57,000 naira, 60,000, 62. I hope I think I'm right, you know. Then we ended at 70. So are you surprised where we ended yesterday? Because there's no average in even all of this. I tried to do, there's no average.
I was surprised, but not so surprised at the same time, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
For starters, the government has constraints with regards to how they have planned the budget for this year. And if we are to even look at the breakdown of the budget, the recurrent expenditure leg, I do not think that they had factored in any form of increment in terms of minimum wage. Let's just look at it from that point of view. So when the organized labor came up with all these figures that you have already listed out, I was wondering how that was going to pan out because it would imply a lot of things. And that's another reason why I wasn't even surprised that we have another budget a supplementary budget that is passed in the National Assembly because they would want to, I'm sure, factor that in under the recurrent expenditure that was not previously captured, given the increase in minimum wage now. So 70,000, yes, for the organized labor to agree to that, I feel like they have also discussed some other things behind closed doors that we're yet to find out. Because if you look at the 6.2 trillion naira supplementary budget that was proposed, that has been passed in the National Assembly, there is the aspect of capital expenditure that will be focused on the health sector, education, and other key areas of the economy. So I have a feeling that behind those closed door meetings and them arriving or agreeing to 70,000 naira as the new national minimum wage, they would have also agreed on some other infrastructural things that would sort of cushion the effect of the current realities on ground in terms of cost of living on Nigerians. That's the surprise part is that they agreed for that amount. But then I now put that in context, given that we just recently saw that the government went to propose the 6.2 trillion supplementary budget, and there's a recurrent leg to it. And there is also the fact that there's a capital expenditure part that caters to certain key sectors that I feel this organized labor would have discussed with the government in order to see how they can alleviate or ameliorate the pains of Nigerians across different areas as they increase the minimum wage to 70,000. I'm sure we'll definitely get some further insight as to what specific projects that they will be channeling those funds to, so that we'll be able to put all our thoughts in the boxes of, okay, this is where it takes and this is why they agreed to 70,000 at the end of the day.
For you, Mr. Adebayo, many Nigerians feel that perhaps that Labour sold out to the federal government yesterday, because I monitored what many Nigerians were saying on social media even yesterday, even a few conversations that I also had, like, okay, so at the end of the day, why did you take us through the gamut of all this if you knew that you were going to end up at 70,000 naira? That's one. Then the other aspect is there are calls for a national protest. Of course, it's been going on now for a while. As many Nigerians also feel that Labour went to bed with government in terms of, okay, trying to pamper, trying to soften the ground and to feel that government is working to assuage Nigerians not to go to the street over the high cost of living crisis.
Thank you, Nancy. At this point, it's difficult to say Labour was sold out. Why trying to negotiate this? You mentioned the fact that we started from about 1 million and ended at about 70,000. And in fixing the national minimum wage of the country, there are so many factors. that should be considered. And coming down from that figure to 70,000, it's a gap on reality. According to the Convention for Fixing National Minimum Wage, that's C-131, there are factors that must be considered before fixing a national minimum wage. We must look at it from the perspective of the workers. That means the need of workers and their family, the cost of living. And then we look at the economic perspective. That's the need for economic development, productivity, the desirability to attain and maintain employment. We have to put all this together to come up with a new national minimum wage. And I think the Labour are now seeing the reality that, yes, Nigerian workers deserve to earn better. They deserve a living wage. But then we must see the reality. We can see the inflationary pressure. We can see the economic downturn. That's why an agreement, though it's in an agreement, to review the minimum wage every 3 months, every 3 years, I mean, is a good consideration because it will give the labor, the organized labor, an opportunity to revisit what they agreed on earlier yesterday. And mind you, I also want to comment on the events leading to that figure, because I believe there's a tripartite committee that, by virtue of Section 5 of the National Minimum Wage Act, and there are meant to be 3 bodies in the tripartite committee. We have from the government, the organized private sector, and the organized labor. But what we had yesterday was just Mr. President, some members of government, and the organized labor. And I believe that process might cause difficulty when it comes to compliance, enforcement, and implementation of the wage. I think we can get to talk about that subsequently.
Just let me come in here, and I want you to expand on that before you go over to your next thought. I don't want us to lose that traction. Are you saying by any means that it's the federal government and organized labor that agreed on their own without organized private sector in the room yesterday? But yesterday I also got information from, I think it was in NECA. NECA, that is the Employers Consultative Association, saying, okay, that they're happy with what went on with the president and labor. Is that what you're insinuating, that perhaps organized private sector will not be happy with that settlement?
Now, on the side, I'll take that as a side talk. But we witnessed what happened yesterday at the State House. The leaders of the organized labor, the president of the NLC and the TUC, the Minister of Labor, the Minister of Information, the President, and some members of government were in a closed-door meeting that led to a slight increment from the 62,000 naira to 70,000 naira. And I want to give a background to this, that prior to this event, the tripartite committee came up with 57,000. 57,000 then, yes. They went up to 52,000 naira. That was where they were before the meeting with the president last week and now this week. And I mentioned the fact that the tripartite committee is a statutory committee. And the mandate of this committee is to come up with a recommendation of what should be tabled before the National Assembly as the national minimum wage. In this case, I understand the fact that the president is trying to be expedient. But in this case, we are the president and the organized labor. The private sector were not represented in the room. And apart from the private sector, we've had the issue of compliance. We know that an employer that pays below the national minimum wage has committed an offense. We've had challenges of state governance, finding it difficult to meet up with the national minimum wage, with payment of national minimum wage. If you are very, very conversant with the fact that last month, there's a state in Nigeria that just started implementing the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Just last month. And before this 70,000, a representative of the Nigerian Governor Forum mentioned the fact that any amount above 60,000 will be very, very difficult and unsustainable. I hope you understand the background or the perspective I'm coming from in this regard.
Okay, Nabila, would you come in here and let's speak to perhaps if is 70K fair? I don't think we've even addressed that issue. Is 70K really fair, putting into perspective the economic realities on ground with headline inflation at over 34%, food inflation 40.87%, core index at over the ranges of 28%, rural inflation up, urban inflation up, headline inflation higher than average headline inflation in the country. That's, what's it now? Headline inflation in states in the country, that is almost many states in the country, higher than the average national headline inflation. So if you put in all these current economic realities on ground, is 70K fair? Then number two, I wonder how they also reached that 70,000 naira. I don't know, you're a research analyst. I also tried to do my own calculations yesterday to calculate like an inflation adjusted wage. If we take an average inflation rate in 2023 now, because we're still in 2024. So let's adjust for 2023 with an average inflation rate. In 2023, we had inflation rates of about 25 to 28% averagely. So if we take that, yes, if we take that and adjust this new 70K or adjust the old one, what figure we would, I hope you understand what I hope my viewers are not lost, that we are turning a bit mathematical, but I'm trying to get into the minds of government and labor as to how they got the 70,000 naira. So over to you.
So if we're being very practical about how much or how fair this amount is, we need to look at it from two perspectives. Now, coming from the average Nigerian, that let's say a family in home of around 4 people, and given the current realities that we have painted around inflation, the general increase in price levels of goods and services, would the average Nigerian will tell you that that 70,000 is not enough. And but is it better than the 30,000 naira that we had previously? I would say yes, and I'll give you my reasons why. Now, if we're looking at it just from the perspective of exchange rate movement, that 30,000 naira on an exchange rate of around 750 would have resulted in $40 per month that an average Nigerian worker would be earning, as with the average or with the exchange rate of 750. But if we now look at the current exchange rate, which is around 1,500 levels, it drops significantly to around $20 per month, which is not sufficient enough. Given how prices, just speaking to bread alone, prices of bread on average have more than, is over 500%, and
Yes.
it's as a result of all these inflationary pressures that we've been talking about. But with the 70,000 now on an exchange rate of 1,500, we'll be having close to $47 per month for the average Nigerian worker. So in that regard, it is better than 30,000 naira that was previously paid as minimum wage in the country. Now, is it fair? Is it enough? Of course, that is where we still have to debate on it because of all these issues that are around the increase in prices of food, increase in house rents, increase in electricity. A lot of things are on the high side. So even with this 70,000, most Nigerians would just be using that amount of money to cater to the needs that they were unable to meet previously. They will not have sufficient to just go above and beyond and be buying what they don't need. They will focus on the necessities and now be able to at least cater to some of the needs that they are unable to meet based on the previous minimum wage. So just looking at it from these two perspectives, is it better? Yes, it is better given the scenarios I painted. Is it enough? That's another question that we have to address. But then we should also consider that looking at just the general revenue streams of the government, they are constrained in terms of in that regard. So how much more expenditure would they want to take on, given all the other things that they have to do, is another thing we need to focus on. That is why we expect that most of the capital expenditure projects, things that are along the lines of capital expenditure, should address infrastructural issues that will eventually transform this minimum wage to a living wage for Nigerians. Because, as Adedoyin rightly mentioned, we are really supposed to be moving beyond the minimum wage topic to a living wage topic, because that is where we'll see that at 70,000, if the family can cater to all their needs, then they wouldn't even be clamoring for that amount, because every other thing as regards how their level of living or standard of living should be has been fixed. That's in terms of infrastructure.
Nabila, let me just stick with you a bit because as we were also talking, I'm trying to do a bit of calculation here, in terms of if Nigerians are better minimum wage wise with the announced 70K. And when you talked about 70K is actually better than 30K. And let us go a bit historical. When President Jonathan was there, minimum wage, I think, was how much again? Was it 18? 18, isn't it? It was 18,
18,000.
yes, 18,000 naira. And when President Jonathan was there, the dollar was about 120 to 150, I think. Then when Buhari came in, 30,000 naira, I guess, the minimum wage. And we knew what exchange rate was at that time, 300 to about 450 to about close to 700 when he handed over. Then now, President Tinubu, a minimum wage of 70K, exchange rate of 1,500, in excess of 1,500 naira. So if we just oppose 18, 30, 70 as against the foreign exchange value, that's exchange rate value to the naira, how are Nigerians better? And perhaps from your own arguments, is 70K actually better than 30,000? Bearing in mind that even at that time, with 18K salary, I can buy bag of rice for about 6,000 to 7,000 naira. Even during President Buhari, a bag of rice was about 40, 50K. Now it's about 85,000 naira, and it depends. That's local rice. So if you are going for more esoteric rice now, is more than that. And you also mentioned earlier that Nigerians will go for more necessities. The data has shown us, at least from the 2018 Nigerians Living Standard Survey from the NBS, that Nigerians have always spent on necessities, which is food. 3/4 of our income go to food as at 2018. And I know that if they do that study now, it will even be more than that. So we've always spent on food. After food, like rent, then transport. There's no luxury. The people enjoying luxury are the politicians that clownly yesterday in the National Assembly told us that they are bequeathing 50% of their 600K salary. So within these things that I've brought to you, please analyze, please, as analysts involved. I hope you understand the scenarios I'm playing, because see my paper is filled with calculation.
I understand the scenarios that you have painted, but let's look at it this way. You are right. When we started minimum wage at 18,000, exchange rate was around those very low levels, which was very good. And then we did not have inflation this high. We didn't have other pressures such as insecurity that were at the levels that they are currently. So all those things really affect the supply side of food. That's if we're looking at all the supply issues, all the infrastructural issues around insecurity, a lack of infrastructure, road network, things that affect our agricultural type of farming system. All those things definitely will pressure food inflation. That is currently there. For exchange rates, just looking at exchange rate, previously at 18,000, exchange rate, as you rightly said, was that during Jonathan's time was around 180. So would have a higher minimum wage in dollar terms on a monthly basis. But with the movement that has occurred, that value, the value of that minimum wage in naira terms has gone down. And if we look at the 30,000 that it was previously, on an exchange rate of 1.5 that we've seen since the start of this year, it's around $20. Just doing the simple math, 30,000 divided by 1,500, get around $20. So with 70,000 and the exchange rate is still around 1.5 levels, that is where we now see around 47 or 40, roughly $47 per month,
Yes, about
which
that.
is better than the $20 that 30,000 naira was given based on the current exchange rate. Now, moving away from
Is that
exchange
in
rate,
nominal value? Sorry, I'm struggling with this thing. I'm struggling with the. You understand what I mean? Because you would say
so this is just us
$46
looking at the
six
nominal value,
cents.
the 70,000 vis-a-vis exchange rate. This is what we are getting in dollar
Yes,
terms. That's
vis-a-vis $46.06 as against $20 of 30,000 naira.
very
You would
correct.
just say nominally 70K is better.
Nominally,
That's what I'm saying.
nominally.
That if you now
But the
flip it,
inflation part of it
thank
now,
you. The inflation adjusted 70K.
yes,
Or
it is
inflation
still not
adjusted
enough.
and
I
exchange
was
rate
saying
adjusted.
that 70,000 naira is still not enough. That was what I initially said, that it is not enough because the current realities, which is the inflationary environment that we're in, will not allow that 70,000 to go a long way in terms of, as you rightly mentioned, food, paying of house rent, just normal transport from here to there. It is still not enough. So that reviewing the something upwards on a nominal terms, yes, it is better, but it's not enough to address the needs of the average Nigerian, because bag of rice now is not the 18,000 that we had before was, yes, you can buy a bag of rice, and that's because we didn't have all those other food pressures, food infrastructural pressures that were affecting the food producing regions. That's in terms of insecurity that I'm referring to now. We didn't have all those things at the levels that they currently are, but we do now. Exchange rate has also moved. There's the imported inflation part of it that exchange rate has affected. So all these things have made prices of the cost of production up, as well as the prices of these goods and services, and how Nigerians can even, achieve or even get to buy all these things. So that pressure is still there, which is why on that front, looking at the inflationary environment or the risk-adjusted inflation, the adjusted inflation adjusted minimum wage, you would see that it is still not enough. But on a nominal terms, just looking at the exchange rate and how it applies, you would see that it is better than 30,000 naira given the current exchange rate pressures that we have.
Now over to you, Adedoyin. Now let's talk about, you mentioned earlier that, of course, the president, we were told yesterday that he will transmit the wage bill, the new wage bill, to the National Assembly next week, perhaps as early as Tuesday or what have you. Do you think that ratification will just be rubber stamp, that the National Assembly would just agree with the president, hook, line, and sinker? That's one. Then number two, what do you think that the wage bill this time will be constituted of? You know why I'm asking that question? Because in the 2019 Wage Act, there are some workers that are exempted from being paid minimum wage minimum wage. Yesterday on X, I saw that Comrade Shehu Sani, Senator Shehu Sani, did say yesterday that, and let me quote him on Twitter, he said, "Just know that if you have a security guard, housemaid, chef, driver, shopkeeper, gardener or cleaner, the minimum wage you will pay them now is 70K. The payment for Musa for gate now 70K. But I also responded to him yesterday and I said, Comrade Senator, judging from the last minimum wage act of 2019, some workers are exempted. Part-time workers, commissions, people that collect commissions, peace parades, companies employing less than 25 people, seasonal workers, then those involved in perhaps this aviation or vessels and all of that. So that is why I'm asking that question in terms of perhaps what this new minimum wage bill of 2024 would be. Because if we are going to copy from what we have in 2019, some workers will be exempted from earning minimum wage. If you have a company and you don't have up to 10 workers, you don't have up to 25, rather. You are exempted from paying minimum wage. I hope you understand my question.
Absolutely.
These
Absolutely.
issues are so technical. We just need to take it from every side,
Thank you, Nancy. First, the issue of bringing a recommendation to the National Assembly. As mentioned earlier, I talked about the flaws in the process, but then that's where we are now. Now, for me, I don't really see the National Assembly doing much to change the face of that bill, looking at the fact that there's a recommendation for 70,000.
So whether they will just change the figure. from 30 to just 70. That would be the change. Is that what you're saying?
No, apart from that, the consideration of the to amend section 3 that talks about 34 of the current National Minimum Wage Act, which talks about the period within which the act will be reviewed. And I think it's a good development that we adjust it to 3 years, giving the stakeholders an opportunity to come together again and negotiate a fair minimum wage that is putting every other things into consideration, economic realities of Nigeria, and also the need of Nigerian workers to earn a living wage. Now, I think the National Assembly will not do much once the new minimum wage of 70,000 is included. And secondly, which means a lot to the organized labor, the 3 years period, it means a lot to them. And I think it should be part of the bill. And I feel the National Assembly will also adopt it. I think those are the two major things that is different from the initial one. And talking about the exceptions to the applicability of the national minimum wage, I want to say this, that it's a global practice. Despite the fact that Nigeria is not a signatory to the Convention C31 that talks about fixing the national minimum wage, it's a global practice that some categories of workers are exempted for the application of the national minimum wage. And the reason for this is not far-fetched, because while we understand the fact that workers are entitled to a fair and a living wage, we must look at the need for economic sustainability. We must look at the fact that employers of labor must have something to be able to give. Now, as rightly mentioned by yourself, Section 4 of the Act provides for the categories of workers that are exempted from the provisions of this Act. You rightly mentioned of seasonal workers, commission-based workers, part-time workers, employers with less than 25 workers.
Sorry, my question, why I brought that in is that what Comrade Shehu Sani said yesterday on X, is he right with this thing? Do you understand? Because many people are getting it so jinxed. They don't understand what the Act says, at least for 2019, until we have a new one. And just like you mentioned, it's globally practiced.
Yes.
So does that mean that Musa at the Gates will collect 70K?
Now, this is if Musa.
But we must also situate it that in those instances, it's a sum that must be agreed between employer and employee.
Yes.
It could be below minimum wage, also over minimum wage. So
now, yes, what will qualify Musa to be entitled to the national minimum wage of at least that 70,000 naira is if the total number of employees
are more than 25.
Employed by Alhaji Shehu are more than 25%.
Yeah.
Are more than 25%. And that's so clear in that. And now I mentioned that the need to attain and sustain employment is why this applicability is relaxed. And it's an incentive for employers to grow and develop to the point whereby they are able to meet up with the national minimum wage. Now, the law sees the fact that now, once an employer is able to employ more than 25 persons, they should be able to comply with the Act.
With the Act.
And I'm seeing, yes, and I'm seeing this more in respect of the private sector, because compliance in this regard has not been encouraging and has been low.
You know why I brought that in? Because I know that from yesterday's announcement, many people, even the menial workers and all of that, people will be going to their employers now, especially if you are not within an employment of 25 people and above. People will start looking for salary increase. Sure, they don't increase minimum wage. Oga, madam, you have to increase my wage.
Yes, you are entitled to it. Once your employer has more than 25 persons under his employment, the law says that your employer has the obligation to pay the national minimum wage. And now, one of the things this could bring about is the tendency for loss of employment. Now, if many employers in Nigeria cannot meet up to pay the least of their workers, and I want us to pay attention to the fact that the minimum wage is not to be paid to everyone. It's not to be paid to everyone that are employed by an employer. It's to be paid to the least paid. Now, that means that the least, the person with the lowest earnings or wage in your employment should not receive less than 70,000 naira a month. I hope you are paying attention to this.
Yeah, I get you, because minimum is minimum.
Yes. And now, the consequence of this is that at the rung of the ladder, now the least will not get less than 70,000. Now, you look at the next, that means that there will be an adjustment to their wage to reflect the new national minimum wage. And that's a big burden, a huge burden too, on the part of the employer. So the economic policies must work hand in hand with the law to ensure that we attain and maintain employment. That's very, very important to the survival of Nigerian workers and also our economy.
Okay, Adedayo, let me just stick with you a bit. Nabila, I will come to you with a question around ability of states to pay, and we will end the show because we have like 4 minutes or so to the end. So I would appreciate if we have brisk answers, but I need to ask Adedayo this question, which is around the wage review that the president has promised will now be 3 years. 3 years from now will be 2027. 2027 will be an election year. Did you see that having a political undertone? Will be in the heat of perhaps campaigns and elections. Do you think that President Tinubu was really strategic while he was speaking with organized labor yesterday? I don't know if organized labor was thinking that way, or if they told Mr. President that while he was negotiating with them, that Mr. President, now election year, would that be taken as a populist that is to satisfy workers? That, okay, Mr. President may even increase it again before election comes so that Nigerians will vote for his party. So a political undertone. Because Mr. Tinubu is a strategist, as it were. So whether the political part of it came in, what do you think about that?
I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so, because at the end of the day, it's a matter of law. Now, when this thing is tabled before the National Assembly and it is adopted, I believe it will transcend President Tinubu's administration.
What if another president comes and does what Mr. President just did now? After all, we had 5 years. And the new president says, I beg, this 3 years is too small. Let's go back to 5. What do you think? Or even the bill that president and co should now be there for 6 years. If that goes, Unko?
Yeah, as said earlier, it's a matter of law. Now, it will be difficult for a current president to review it upward. And I was not privy to what happened in the closed-door meeting between the organized labor and the president. I believe they must have had maybe 2, 3 before they agreed on 3. And I think 3 is fair, looking at how fast things are happening in this current dispensation. Okay. And once this is adopted by the National Assembly, I think it's good for all.
Okay, Nabila, let's come back to states. The sub-emperors, or even the emperors that we have, because even when we're paying 30, some states could not pay 18. Just, I think Adedayo mentioned earlier that just the state started paying 30,000 a few days ago. So yes. Do you think that the states will still have the ability to pay 70, though exemption of some states? I think Lagos State has said that it could pay even before this thing happened. Those states also mentioned that it could pay. I interviewed Governor Basaki was on this show that time, and he said that, of course, it will be sustained 70K. So other states, do you think that the ability to pay is there, despite higher FAC allocation to them?
So it is expected that for all states, they should be able to meet the national minimum wage. But we should bear in mind that not all states generate the same level of internally generated revenue. Now, FAC allocations, in my view, should just be regular cash flows that states get from the federal government. The states should not be solely dependent on the FAC allocations to meet their recurrent expenditure or runnings of their states. So this would just mean that for states that may likely come out to say that they are unable to meet the new minimum wage, they would have to look for internally generated sources of revenue and bolster that in order to be able to get funds that will be able to be channeled and pay the new minimum wage. But definitely, I won't be surprised to see or hear that some states are, like he rightly mentioned, just one state just implementing the 30,000 that has been for over 3-4 years. The 70,000 will take a while, and they should start to look for means that will help to meet that new minimum wage before the next 3 years that it will be reviewed again. So I feel like they should look for internal sources of revenue and not solely depend on FAC allocations. And if they can even address some of the infrastructural issues in their states with those funds, I mean, they would also sort of reduce the pressure on their workers in their states because of the infrastructural projects that they have invested some of these funds in.
Okay, Adedoyin, just the final one before we go. How many millions of workers are really entitled to this? Because when we're talking about minimum wage now, the whole country would just went agog, not knowing that not the whole country will receive this as it were, 70K. If we take a look at even the civil service and public service, I'm not even sure there are up to 20 million Nigerians that are entitled to this, employed by government that will be paid the minimum, that's the least level in the cadre, 70K. So what should the rest of us do? Millions of Nigerians, the rest of us.
Nancy, now, I think the government, when I mean the government, I mean the federal government, subnational government, must set the standard for all other sectors of the economy, must set the especially for the private sector. Now, when we have subnational governments, now, looking at the recent decision of the Supreme Court, the local governments, we also have to fill in the shoe. Yes, they will have to fill in the shoe. So when we have subnational government like the state government and local government finding it difficult to comply with what the law says about the national minimum wage, how do you want to address non-compliance with the private sector?
Okay.
Now, a vast number of Nigerians are working in the private sector. How do we want to collaborate? That's from the Ministry of Labor and the Wage Commission. How do they want to collaborate to ensure that the national minimum wage is being complied with?
Okay.
I think a vast majority of Nigerian workers are entitled to this.
Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. Thank you to you both for joining us on today's edition of the program. Quite insightful, at least that we looked at some of the critical nitty-gritty areas. There are a lot of angles, but of course we'll continue in coming days. So thank you very much for coming on the show. I've been speaking with Adedoyin Adebayo, who is the publisher at The Laborer's Guide, as well as Nabila Muhammad, research analyst at Chapel Hill, Denham. Both of you should have a wonderful weekend, and thank you again for joining us. And that's it. And that's it for today, and of course this week. Thank you for your company as always this week. Please join me again next week, God willing. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji.
Time has come for Africa to engage in serious conversation aimed at finding answers for its problems.
My brothers and sisters, I firmly believe this mutually beneficial friendship will benefit from opportunities created by the African Economic Congress platform. And this is the reason we need to deepen democracy in Africa and empower citizens and civil society organizations.
Hello everyone, I am Nancy Naji, a financial journalist, the anchor of Moneyline with Nancy on AIT. Today I'll be talking about smart savings tips for students.
Great Nigerian students.
Very good.
So attention students, hold your ears so that you can say goodbye to financial struggles. Number one, calculate your income. Know how much money is coming in so that you can set a realistic budget. Number two, track your spending. Monitor monthly expenses to identify areas for potential savings. Number three, set financial goals for yourself. Establish short and long-term goals to guide your budgeting efforts. Number four, compare your income and expenses. Ensure that your income covers your essential needs, adjusting spending accordingly. Number five, buy second-hand items if you can. And if I know you can, so save money by purchasing used items, especially books that are expensive items for you while in school. Number six, cook your meals. Cut cost by limiting dining out. Cooking at home is not only economical, but promotes self-care. I'll see you all in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy, and join us on our program on AIT too. Hello everyone, I am Nancy Naji, financial journalist. I'll be talking about common money mistakes to avoid. And number one, ignoring financial challenges. Tough times, of course, bring discouragement, but don't let it lead you to overlooking financial issues. Make 2024 the year for financial organization. Address and understand your financial concerns. Seek advice from professionals to gain insights and clarity. Number two, avoid over concentration in investments. Don't put your investments in one basket. Placing all your financial resources in a single investment or sector poses risk of financial losses. Experts advise diversifying your portfolio across various assets like stocks, bonds, real estate, and more for better risk management. Number three, neglecting an emergency fund. The lessons we learned in 2020 from the COVID-19 pandemic emphasize the necessity of an emergency fund. It serves as a crucial safety net for unexpected events like job loss or unforeseen medical expenses. Even starting with small contributions can lay the foundation for this essential financial cushion. Number four, open communication about family finances. Discussing money matters within the family, especially between spouses, is very vital. Understanding each other's approach to money and responses to financial situations foster clarity. So if your husband is the prudent type that knows about investment, he can handle issues about money. If your wife is the same, she can handle issues about money. But joint discussions enable better family financial decisions, including involving grown children, establishing a clear understanding of the family's financial standing. I'll see you all again in the next video. I hope you've learned common money mistakes to avoid in 2024. I'll see you all again. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Moneyline with Nancy TV. Hello everyone, I am Nancy Naji, the anchor of Moneyline with Nancy on AIT. Today I will be talking about January federal government savings bonds. The Debt Management Office has introduced two new savings bonds for subscription at 1,000 Naira per unit. These are the initial offers for 2024, with one being a 2-year bond set to mature on January 17, 2026 at an interest rate of 11.033% per annum. The other is a 3-year bond maturing on January 17, 2027 with an interest rate of 12.033% per annum. Both bonds are open for subscription. They've been opened from Monday, January 8th, and they will last till Friday, January 12th, with a settlement on January 17th and coupon payment on April 17th, July 17th, October 17th, and January 17th. Investors can subscribe starting from a minimum of 5,000 Naira and in multiples of 1,000 Naira thereafter, with a maximum subscription of 50 million Naira. Interest is paid quarterly and the principal amount is repaid in full upon maturity. These savings bonds, like other federal government securities, are supported by the full faith and credit of the federal government and secured against Nigeria's general assets. What are you waiting for? As little as 5,000 Naira, you can invest. Check out your licensed bank or your stockbroker. I'll see you in the next video.